So on top of the bully tormenting me and my employer abusing me, on that morning when I woke up in March 2018, I started crying and I couldn't stop. I had had enough. I realized the week before that the tables had been turned all the way around and I had been set up to be fired.
Welcome, I'm your host Stefano, and this is When Leaders Talk, a podcast about leadership and most importantly, about leaders. I always wonder how a person could take their own life because of some abusive behaviors, especially in the workplace. And yet, hundreds of people in the United States, thousands of people around the world resort to suicide because of aggressive behaviors, aggressive leaders in their job. And I'm grateful there are people like Vicki Courtemanche who actually stand up and raise their voice to help these people and to avoid that leaders with aggressive, abusive behaviors bring someone else to an extreme solution to the problem. Vicki is an amazing person. She was a victim of abuse in the workplace. And after a period of healing, because she was wounded, her brain suffered an injury from this abuse, she decided to take control of her life and help others, actually. And she founded she's a co-founder of End Workplace Abuse. And not only that, she has drafted a piece of legislation that is called Workplace Psychological Safety Act. We will discuss about this. We will discuss in this episode on the recovery from this kind of abuse, on what is needed, and also what you can do. Because everyone, first of all, can recover, but also everyone can learn and do something about abusive leaders, against abusive leaders. So this episode is about the dark side of leadership and how to react to it. I hope this episode will contribute to increase awareness on this problem and to make you think about it. So please subscribe to the podcast so we can actually make our voice louder and have other great guests like Vicki telling the stories. You can also subscribe to my social media where I keep the conversation on leadership, every aspect of leadership, not just the dark side, going. And also you can visit my website, masteryourseed.com, where in the blog, I still talk about leadership. Also, you can contact me on stefano@masteryourseed.com if you are interested in leadership and executive coaching that I propose. Well, with no further ado, I leave the floor to Vicki. Vicki, what is your definition of leadership, if you have any, if you want to share with us?
I guess my definition would be of someone who is just and trustworthy. If there is no trust in a relationship, then there really is no relationship. So it gets down to the real nitty-gritty. And if someone does fall into those categories of being just and trustworthy, it obviously will reflect that they're unbiased, they're fair-minded, they are caring. So all of those other things, it is a tough word to define because it has so many aspects to it, but that really is the heart of it for me.
I am with you. I mean, this is the 36th episode, and I have heard 36 definition of leadership. But that's the beauty of this concept. Um, um, it's not defined by you can find a lot of definition of vocabulary even if you Google it up, and yet at the end of the day, the definition we give is rooted in our experiences. And I guess the words that you use, trust, just, trustworthy, just, and unbiased, those words come from your experience as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're here. I'm happy you're here, and you're here because you have initiated something that started many years ago, a few years ago, when you were still working. Do you want to share your experience?
Sure. I came out of work in 2018, and I had been experiencing workplace bullying. So I had a coworker who was making my, day-to-day life miserable. I would call it, mental harassment, morning, noon, and night. My inbox was always filled with harassing emails, and she was sabotaging my ability to work and so on and so forth. But that, and as horrible as that sounds, that wasn't quite the worst of it. 6 months deep after my supervisor failed to intervene effectively, I went to HR. And I had been told many years before not to go to HR, but I was between a rock and a hard place. I'm an older woman. My job was nichey. It wasn't like I could just, say, well, the heck with this, I'm going, someplace else. I probably should have, but that's not how my frame of mind went. So at the advice of another person whose work kind of intersected with HR, I did go to them. And I was told that there was a complaint process and that they would perform an investigation and that the situation would be taken care of. And I believe them. I was a 20-year employee. This institution was also one of my alma maters. I gave charitably to the institution. So I completely believed to these people. They were sitting in an administrative office building on a college campus, cashing six-figure paychecks. I trusted them. That's where I made my mistake. And what happened for the next 9 months, because that's how long I stayed after I had initially spoken to them, was that nothing was ever done to change my work environment. Nothing was ever done to deter the bully, not one thing. At some point in time, a lot of the tables were turned against me. I was asked to act professionally and to conduct myself professionally when I had not even acted unprofessionally once. So just a lot of just crazy things. And so on top of the bully tormenting me and my employer abusing me, on that morning when I woke up in March 2018, I started crying and I couldn't stop. I had had enough. I realized the week before that the tables had been turned all the way around and I had been set up to be fired. So, and I, again, was so mentally harassed that I didn't even tell anyone. I didn't even tell my husband. I just kept ruminating, which is what people do when someone lies to you and you are told these things. And so I was ruminating and ruminating for 6 days. I barely slept. I'm lucky if I slept 6 hours in 6 days. And then, like I said, that morning I just snapped. And so that was my exit from the workplace. And then I began another journey, and that is recovering from what I endured.
I was listening to your words, and every time I hear stories of toxic leadership and things, I get upset, and I can still I feel the emotion coming from you, and I guess it's still upsetting talking about it, even almost 6 years after the event. So, and actually, thank you for being here. But I also want to thank you for everything you've done since, um, and that's where I think this conversation will get even more interesting. I don't want to spoil anything, of course, and I will let you um, describe how you decided to take control of your life and to do something about your experience.
Mhm. That was very difficult. You know, as I said, you know, just leaving the workplace is not the end of the abuse. You're just starting another horrific journey to recover. At that point, I was physically sick, um, you know, mentally harassed to the point of, you know, I just didn't know. And I actually didn't find out until later, but I had incurred a brain injury, so I didn't understand half of what I was experiencing and feeling. I self isolated. I wouldn't go out of the house without my husband. I never, even to this day, have gone back near the institution. Initially, well, I should say one thing before I go on, is that I did not realize the institutional complicity in this until the day after I left the workplace. So I had already really essentially snapped and left. And then the next day I realized that I had more enemies than the bully. And, you know, so it was so hard to wrap my mind around this. This is the 21st century. We live in one of the greatest countries on earth. I was like, how do people treat people so cruelly and so inhumanely under the radar of any law or any form of accountability? Because that day I also found out that I had no legal recourse for anything that was done. So I find myself, you know, racked with health harm on every level of human well-being, and I'm financially crippled. You know, I voluntarily left, I retired. I was not ready to retire. I went to the workplace later in life. You know, so I was, you know, my life was leveled. And honestly, I didn't know how to negotiate it. And it took me a long time. It actually took me 2 years before I got to the point where I said to my husband, I think I feel like myself again. But one of the things that I did, and I tell this to other people who find themselves in my situation, is at the 4 month mark, I began fighting back. This woman who is, you know, she's now my colleague and partner in an organization and some workplace legislation that we'll talk about. But at the time, she she was working on a piece of legislation about this. And she was just great with social media and connecting and things like that. And so that gave me, besides my faith in God, that came first. And then second, it was her, you know, out there letting me know that I wasn't alone and that there were things that you could do about it. And as I said, I was very sick, but I was 4 months out of the workplace, and I decided that I would take on being the endorsement director. So I would go after other organizations to endorse the legislation. And I did it in my PJs, sitting, you know, because I wasn't ready to go out. I couldn't talk. I really just couldn't. But it gave me that sense. And she had sent me a letter, and I said, "Can I rewrite this letter?" And she's like, "Yes, go." So she gave me power, you know, to put my own words in this letter, and she gave me power to like back this piece of legislation. And that's what happened. I kept just inching my way. I got involved. I became eventually a support group leader. We were running them every Tuesday or Wednesday night. I can't remember now. We have faded them out a little bit, and it's turned into a different thing. But whatever I could do. And 15, well, maybe about a year and a half out of the workplace, I testified at the Massachusetts State House, and that to me was really the most powerful thing that I had done, because now I was, standing up there and speaking powerfully. And as soon as we left, I went around the corner and cried my eyes out. But I was like, I spoke. And so since that time, I have been, working on legislation. And as I said, I've been out of the workplace for 6 years, almost 6 years this March. And 2 years ago, my partner, Deb Felzoy, she and I started an organization called End Workplace Abuse. And our primary focus is on workplace bullying and mobbing. But if you go to the website, you will see that it lists all of the worker rights bills in every other state, because that is one of many of our ways that we partner with other organizations, because a lot of these issues, they intersect. And at the same time, I keep saying, I don't know what got into us, but we both had the time on our hands, and we sat down and said, you know what, let's write our own piece of legislation. And so we penned what is called today the Workplace Psychological Safety Act.
A lot of things that you say that really strike me. The first thing is, you said at the beginning of this, you mentioned how the abuser was more popular than you were. What do you think is the reason behind this dysfunctional reality, if I must say, where a person who is aggressive, violent, in a verbal way, I'm sure not, I hope not in a physical way, and yet has more success compared to a person like you who is actually a victim? I don't want to say, probably the word success is not the best one to use in this. But
I use victim. Victim is a good word to use. Targeted by the bully, victimized by the employer. Yes.
Right. Why a bully is more popular and more supported than the victim?
All right. Well, again, just the words. I would not say that she was more popular. But she certainly got away with a lot of bad behavior. And the reason for that, there's a couple of reasons, but when you peel all the layers back, it's the most important one. Employers in the United States are not liable for psychological safety. All right, so that's the problem. When I reported psychological abuse, if they acknowledge it, they will be liable for it. So that is why the bully, and everyone, we all know about bullies walking around the workplace, that's why they get away with it, because if the employer acknowledges their bad behavior, then they are liable for it. And so it's such an unhealthy way to deal with it, but that is how the legal department pulls it down. They are trying to avoid a threat of liability over taking care of an employee's human well-being. It's a choice that they're making. And so that's why the bully gets away with it. The employer is trying to avoid a threat of liability. And then instead of doing it, they double down, and then they abuse the employee again, so you leave. So the minute I walked out that door, and actually the minute I severed from them 12 weeks later, I was not a threat of liability to them anymore. I don't know what they consider me today, but that's another story.
I mean, there are actually a lot of things to be liable for. I mean, if you consider what you said earlier, you had a brain wound, basically, and that's something we have some problems, difficulty grasping. That is really the level of damage that an abusive leader can have, can provoke on us. is a brain injury, as you mentioned. For someone else, it's also physical injury, and I have some repercussion on our body, how the body reacts to things, and it's also the recovery time that we need to finally stand up again, and raise our heads and understand that it's not us, it's the person. It's we are a victim of an abusive leader. Toxic leadership is actually quite, if you look at statistics, even today that we're talking a lot about toxic leadership, statistics are still saying that we are not creating the right culture, because pretty much 1 out of 4 employees complain about their leaders. And of course, in this mix, you have someone that is trying to take advantage, trying to weaponize whatever the tools they have, but the majority is not. There's still a high number of people unsatisfied about their boss. I'm not saying I'm unsatisfied about the boss because it's not a good boss, because it doesn't have the competencies or the capabilities. It's because they are bullied, because it's mobbing, is abuse, is aggression. I had this kind of people in my life, and it was terrible, and I felt bad. I felt empty. But I don't want to talk about myself. One of the things that I admire about you is how you, as I mentioned earlier, you took control of your life. You did something about it, and the company you founded with Deb, and also the Workplace Psychologist Safety Act. How would you define psychological safety in a working place?
Well, I guess we have to back up a little bit on that, because it's the behavior. That's what we did that was different with this piece of legislation. Instead of using the term bullying, which we do define in our legislation, but that's been part of the problem. There's so many different words out there, and it conjures up different images for different people. And so people, when they hear bullying, they're thinking, oh, everybody has a bad boss who yells at them in the workplace. That's not the end of the world. They are not realizing what the behavior is. So what we have defined it as is psychological abuse. And, I used that, earlier in explaining my story, because I didn't realize it so much at the time. I mean, I knew she was harassing me, but I didn't realize how much it was just that mental harassment, inside your head, that, making me explain that, just talking down to me day in and day out, and leaving me out of things, and all, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's hard to define it outside of the words. When we use the word psychological abuse, all of a sudden, the people in the United States who have fallen victim to this have been just coming out in throngs, because now we're saying words that people understand. Did I answer that question?
You do. I mean, you do. And it's actually, once again, what is one of the things that really hit me every time is that you go on LinkedIn, there are podcasts about psychological safety and the end of abuse and these kind of things. And yet, at the end of the day, the results are not coming yet. Surely it's no lack of knowledge. Surely it's no lack of communication about this. And one other thing, and that probably is lacking, is for people who have been abused to really have the right instrument they can use against either the employer or their boss or the abuser in general. And the act you're working on, it goes in the right direction. Would you describe what's in this act, and what are the fundamental tools that you want to give to people to react to abusive behaviors?
Well, this kind of probably will answer what you asked before about the psychological safety piece. What we're after is the work environment, because employers are responsible for the work environment. And what we always say is that um, employers control the environment and laws control the employer, right? So they're the ones, they're held responsible for physical, if someone had punched me, then they would have taken care of it. They're responsible to give us clean water, environmental, fresh air. They're responsible for the work environment. And that's what this is. So when you're in a work environment and someone is mentally harassing you, it's on the employer. It's a safety issue, and that's what we have tried to bring. That's what we try to bring out in the legislation. We are not going after the intent of the perpetrators, because it is such a high threshold to get there, and it puts the burden back on the people who have been targeted and victimized. So we're trying to keep the burden on the employer. And what we did was we drew from sexual harassment law, and what that has done for us, it set that precedent with the Supreme Court, is that they don't, they draw the line at a hostile work environment. So if someone is working and being sexually, they're harassed, it's enough. You don't have to incur injury. And that's what we're trying to do with this. We want to get in front of that health harm. So we want the employers to change that environment. And they will, right now, as I said, they are negatively incentivized. If you hold them accountable for this work environment, we will be incentivizing them in a positive way. Okay, just like OSHA, because this is one of the things that a lot of people say to us with this law, is it's going to open the floodgates to the courts. And we say no. That's what everybody said about OSHA when the government addressed physical safety in the workplace. But that is not what happened. The floodgates didn't open. What happened was the employer complied. Because again, now they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to avoid liability, but now they're positively incentivized to take care of their employees. And we want to do the exact same thing with psychological safety.
Right. I mean, and that's you made me think when I was back in the Navy. In my country, in Italy, there was a very strong law about safety in the workplace, but it was all about physical safety, right? So if you handle dangerous materials or explosives, or you're working at some height and these kind of things. And everything in the law is clear. The employer has to do this, and this to avoid incidents and that could actually lead to injuries or death. When it comes to mental safety, the line is not so clear. It's so much blur, and the laws are so uncertain. And of course, sometimes it's hard to assess. But once again, what we lack is understanding the impact of this. And we should think also to the people actually took extreme measures. Someone resorted to suicide for abusive behaviors on the workplace. I mean, we read, even when we talk about abusive behaviors, even now there is a lot of talking about social media and the impacts on teenagers, and some of them taking their life because of abusive behaviors from their peers or teachers or whatever. That's the extent of the damage of an abusive person on another. And that's why I'm very happy there are people like you who react to it. But not everyone, right, has the same energy, if you want, or time or possibility to do the same. So what is that you will, if there is a message you would like to send to these people listening, and they are victims like you were. What is the message you would send to these guys?
Well, I would say to everyone, because it is tough, when you just, again, they find themselves so isolated, and half the time they don't know that this phenomenon even exists. Like myself, we don't find out until after we're victimized. And so, I guess the thing that I would say is that, there is life again after workplace abuse. It's hard work, but you can get there. And one of the women that I have had the honor to testify with at the State House this past October, her name is Jen Fraser, and she wrote this book, The Bully Brain, and it's been really inspirational. I'm just finishing up reading it now, and it's like I know it. I have the lived experience. Is that our brains are they have the ability to heal, and they have the ability to make them, you can make them stronger, that kind of thing too. So I do find a lot of people who are, it's been tough to get people to come out and stand with us. People are, they just don't have that for whatever reason. And I know, and I mean, they are broken. It's like I said, they level our lives. And so I say that with no judgment, but it's really difficult for them to stand up. And so, I just I would just encourage people, and that's what I do try to do, is encourage people to say, you know what, you're going to be okay. It might take some time, but you're not alone. There's even people in our organization right now who are stepping up into roles, and they are still in abusive work environments, so that's what we do. We reach out to each other. And there was one woman I knew, and I didn't really have contact with her per se, but I reached out to her and I said, look, I heard what's going on at work. I'm here if you want to talk. You're not alone. You're not, and we just, be there for each other. And we are, we're growing in leaps and bounds. We have 15 new state bill directors, so we're ready to take this legislation. Right now, it's still sitting. And actually, we had some news this week. Our bill was attached to another bill here in the state that has similar concerns, and they moved it forward to Senate Ways and Means. Deb and I actually have emails out to the Joint Committee on Labor and Workforce Development to see exactly what their intent was by joining the bills. But it didn't die. It didn't die. Legislation didn't die. And
that's great news.
It is great news. And for a first year bill to move even that far is unheard of. So we made a lot of noise. We had, and this, is not, it's just what's happening with this movement right now, is that we know we had about 1,000 people come forward for the public hearing last October. So to give you an idea, 2 years ago, Deb and I did testimony trainings. Like, we're trying to prep people how to do, take all the fear out of it and everything else. And we actually trained 150 people, but only 50 people came forward. And even that, we were thrilled, because nowhere in the United States had 50 former targeted, victimized employees come together and testify. And we thought we were just, fantastic. So this time we had 1,000. And we're getting ready to go to Rhode Island. There's going to be public hearings there, because they don't have a joint committee. They have a House and a Senate. So we will be able to give testimony before both of them this coming spring. And the legislation passed last year in Rhode Island. The Senate only won a half of that. And we have a new House rep on who's taken on this bill. So we're pretty certain that's going to be our first win. And that's the thing, once you get that first win with that legislation, it starts, building that momentum. And as I said, we just did a state bill director training a week ago Saturday, and we had 266 people from around the country come out to that meeting. And now we have 15 new state bill directors. And, there's other people contemplating that, and we're building teams in those states and everything else. So there's a lot of work to be done, but people out there, I think, they're catching that contagion, that there's really something of substance that is being done. And the way that we're doing it, we purposely did not set up a hierarchy in our organization, and we don't know how we're going to move forward. But right now, we have not even formed as a nonprofit because we didn't want to get into all that headache of having a board and everything else. And we really like this level field, so that that's what we say, we're right here on the ground. We're doing the exact same thing that we're asking you to do. We'll show you how to do it, but we're right here too. And so, it's really, people are just, they're like, okay, all right, I'll go.
Well, first of all, congratulations for the achievements. I mean, last time we talked, of course, in our first call a few days ago, you were uncertain. You were actually, if I remember wrong, quite pessimistic about it. But now I see that there are a lot of progress is made, and it's fantastic. It's great, and once again, congratulations. Is something that is needed. Is needed probably here in the United States. Is needed in many other countries, and there are countries that are actually, they already have a kind of advanced legislation on this workplace safety, psychological safety. For example, especially, as always, the Scandinavian countries like Norway and Denmark and Sweden and Finland. Those are the countries that normally ahead, especially when it comes to legislation, laws protecting human rights and social issues. They are always a step ahead, and they can be of inspiration for everyone else, at least in what we call the Western world, meaning all those countries that they share the same values, and of course others probably are less sensitive on the topic, and nonetheless is something we can aspire to, right? A global legislation and the involvement of the United Nations, this kind of things. And maybe what you're doing is a first step, or maybe already a second step in that direction. I wanna highlight once again the important message that is to stand up, right? To use your experience to make everyone aware of the dangers, but most importantly, of the possibility of heal from this kind of injuries. You already mentioned something in a previous comment, but I want to ask you again, what is that you have used, to recover? And I'm talking both from an inner perspective and from the outside help from someone else or something else.
Well, when I first came out, I was once I realized that this is what happened to me, there was, I was able to understand what had happened to my brain, that my body was really flooded with stress hormones. My brain in particularly had a lot of, cortisol. As I said to you, I had been struggling with insomnia for 6 months. And then that last week, I hadn't slept hardly at all. I mean, really almost to the point, that I was just in this like fog, it was like a denial and, everything else. So it's a really, really tough place to be. And again, I'm a lifelong treadmill girl. And I love walking outside when it's nice, but I'm in New England. So, like right now, it's just not happening. But I and I had stopped, during the abuse, I had stopped exercising. I had stopped eating right. I wasn't able to sleep. I had, all these, bad things going on. So my first goal that I set for myself just weeks out of the workplace was that I was going to go on the treadmill at least 5 days a week for 30 minutes every day. And I had refused taking anti-anxiety medicine while I was still at work. But when at that point in time, I realized how much I really needed to sleep. So I did start taking, something at one pill at night so that I would go down to sleep, because I had lost the ability to go to sleep and I had lost the ability to stay asleep. So I had two functions, and that was the worst to overcome, because it really, that even went beyond the 2 years before I was able to sleep through the night. I would get up in the morning and I'm 3 o'clock, I'm talking in the middle of the night, and I would go to the window and I would wait for the sun to come up and I would stare at it, because, your brain is saying, I'm saying to my brain, look, see, the sun's coming up. That means when it goes down, you need to go down. It was like a really hard place, but I did set that goal, and I was able to exercise, and I don't know how, because I was physically exhausted, but I did make my 12-week mark. So it's just like, that's what I did. It was just like setting, okay, this is a goal. And then I realized at 12 weeks, when I thought I was going to be better, I realized really how sick I was. And, more emotionally and mentally, and I'm trying to negotiate now. I have severed with my employer. I don't have a job. I was looking for a job, and then that was the stress of that. And my husband's like, look, you can't, you need to get better. No job, so it was just, I had to keep taking just chunks of my life and saying, okay, this is what I'm doing today, and this is what I'm doing for this month, and then I'm doing that. My husband, and I'm sure I told you that in our, pre-meets and everything else, he was my rock. He just took care of me. He listened to me. He never told me to get over it. He just did everything that I needed to do. And he tried to take care of me. And so he would, he'd say, let's go away and let's go to the beach, or let's go, all those things that I love, I could care less about. I didn't care anymore. I didn't want to go on vacation. I didn't want to go to sit on the beach. I had this flat feeling, but he didn't let me do that. He was like, come on, we're going here, we're going there. And, that was another good thing too, is having that, support system of someone who's just not going to let you sit there. And I know that's not, again, for everyone. I realized how blessed I am, that I was in a relationship. And so there was another source of income in this home, and, and his, physical, mental, support that he gave me. Not everyone has that. I just want to jump back on something that you had said earlier, because we kind of went past it, but, there are 3 outcomes with this type of workplace behavior, and they are that either the person is voluntarily leaves, like I did, pushed to the breaking point. I left. I had no choice. There was a flame licking at my back. I was going to be fired. I jumped. Or the next one is they do fire you. There are some people who still just don't believe it. I happen to have a personal advisor who had said to me point blank, he's like, Vicki, if your supervisor calls you to a meeting and you don't go, she can fire you on the spot for insubordination. And so I realized, when my supervisor set up a meeting with the bully that I had been refusing to meet with under the circumstances, that if I didn't show up, I would be fired. So that's the other one. So then people are they get fired. They're shocked. They've done nothing wrong. They are exemplary employees. They're hardworking. They're bright. They've been bullied, and the table gets turned and they get fired. So again, mental torment. And then the third outcome is that people die. And sometimes it is, as you said, there were a lot of, physical, there's cardiovascular, there's immune compromising, which I had a lot of, and I actually did end up going on a blood pressure medicine too. So, there's a lot of other health issues, but yes, there are many people who actually die in the workplace. They'll have a heart attack, and there are people who die in the aftermath. That it might be a month out, it might be 6 months out. There's someone here in Massachusetts, it's his mother who has, gone and done a lot of this work, but it was 2 years out. He just didn't get on that path. And there's a story, there's a young man, that I did work a little bit with their program. It's called Justice for Evan. And this young man was just an exemplary employee at Kroger. And Kroger is the largest grocer, and they go by different names, but they are the largest grocer in the United States. And he and I had very similar stories, but his was far worse. He had two bullies in the workplace, and he was actually harassed outside the workplace, which I wasn't. They had infiltrated his phone, so he didn't even feel safe in his home either. He had, actually moved back into his parents. But anyway, when he realized that they were trying to fire him, that was the thing that he snapped, and from what I understand, had a psychotic break. And he was at his parents' home, and when the father went to check on him, he had killed himself. So it is like, and he was just, if you talk to the people that love him, his family, his friends, his co-workers, he was just the epitome of the person that you would want to live next door, the person you'd want to work with in the workplace. And this is what happened to him. We're all unique. And why I didn't, on 6 hours sleep in 6 days, why I didn't have a psychotic break, I don't know. That's an answer that I cannot explain. But I certainly could see that I could have, because I see now how, confusing it was. So anyway, I want people, to be aware that those are the only 3 outcomes that are affiliated with this. So that's right there. It's so alarming. It's human rights violations is what it is.
Yeah, I guess taking your life for the behavior of someone, your boss, someone that you should trust, and you mentioned, you used the word trust at the beginning. You should trust this person. That working should not be a pain. It should be pleasure. And I know that most of the times it's not, but we can still find something pleasant about our occupation, our work. And when there is someone is taking it that away, you need to do something. And you are absolutely right when you say that everyone is different, and you were in a way lucky of having your husband that was helpful, supportive. He never dismissed what you were saying, understanding, and he was able to shake you and take you out of of your home. And this is precious. That doesn't mean, of course, that we all need a partner or someone. Well, we might need a network, a support system, as you mentioned. We need, mostly we need some inner strength, the same strength that you had, that kept you going. That's kept you going on the treadmill every day and exercise, because exercising is important. Like trying practices like mindfulness or meditation is also those are also tools that has been scientifically proved to help healing a lot. And there are other things, of course, talking to some professional that can help you, can be a therapist, can also be to some extent a coach. Those are also techniques that you can use to recover and not let you. Don't allow yourself to go down until you don't have the strength to leave anymore, and the only option you see is death. That's very sad. And I'm getting emotional on this. Let's try to steer this ship away from those dark waters a little bit, and the one thing that I'm impressed with about yourself is how you have taken, and once again I'm repeating, I know, but you're taking control of your life, and you have become a leader yourself. You are the co-founder with Deb of this, and workplace abuse organization is beautiful. So what kind of leader do you think you are?
Well, a reluctant one. I didn't sign up
Yeah,
for
you're not the
this.
first. You're
I
not the
didn't
first. There are
sign
many
up.
people who found themselves in leadership position without really be. I'm not saying ready because you are ready, of course, but but almost unwillingly.
Yeah, it's and what you were saying a little bit before that too. It's, I can see now in some ways, by yeah, and like my faith in God. When you're talking about mindfulness and things like that, my faith in God was huge, part of this for me. So I had that. That was like my support. I dwelt on what God said and what God said about me, not what other people said about me, and that kind of thing. But or just now see when sometimes when I go down a road, I forget what I was going to say. But no, we were talking about being a leader, and so I was starting to say I was kind of a reluctant leader. But everything that I had gone through in my prior life, now I kind of look back and I'm saying, oh, maybe it was preparing me, to be this person that I am today, because I still just didn't see myself as a leader. But when you go through this, you're pushed. It's like I was so pushed against the wall with every bit of my being, and I only saw that I had two choices. It's either I can just be quiet and stay in this corner and die, or I can speak. And that was what I started, to think about early on, long before I ever spoke. In my devotions and in my quiet time, I felt like God, was saying to me, Vicki, you need to write. And so I took, I am one of the few, I guess it's a rarity. I documented almost everything that was done to me, by my employer as well as the bully. So I had multiple emails, and I sat down and I used them again, maybe 4 to 6 months out of the workplace. I had, and that was kind of painful to go back and to read all those emails now, realizing that they were playing me. But nonetheless, I used those. I put them in chronological order, and I used it as the framework, and I started writing. And at some point in time, I was reading these books and everything else, and I said to my husband, I said, I think I'm going to be a whistleblower. And I was like, you know, and yeah, it was kind of like, wow, how did, like I said, I didn't sign up for this, but that's what happened. And here I sit, and I try to lead, by example. As I said, Deb and I are shoulder to shoulder on the ground with the people that we work with. We are not trying to be better or prove anything or anything else. What we want to do is to not lose another person to this kind of abuse. And just on January 8th, we read that another person, Dr. Candia Bailey at Lincoln University, it's a brilliant woman, took her own life after being bullied, harassed by, people at the university. So, this is the thing. Our work is not done until until we start heading off the people in the workplace. These employees, like I said, I had no idea what I was, that this was happening until we can raise public awareness so that every employee in the United States understands that this could be happening to them, and to watch out for this kind of behavior. Then our job is, like we're not even close to being where we need to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're not even close.
Mhm.
But we're going. Thanks thanks to you and people like you. Thanks to who is doing something, is taking initiative. Thanks to whistleblower. Thanks to people like you mentioned Jennifer Fraser, that will be actually a guest in the podcast in a couple of weeks, and we will talk about the bully brain. People like her writing books and telling stories, and when you read the book, I've read the book. When you read the book, it tells amazing stories and at the same time terrifying stories, right? Um, the amazing part is the healing part. The terrifying story, of course, is why you have to heal, what led to the healing part.
Mm-hmm.
And that having been said, so what is the recommendation that you would give to a young leader coming to you and asking for suggestions on how to be a good leader?
That's a tough one because that younger generation coming up is already like they're so different than than people from my generation. So they already get it. They're not putting up with this, kind of thing. So, but again, things look what's happened over the course of my lifetime, and so I would say that to them too is what you remember who you are today. Don't lose sight of that. You're not better than anyone else. Just be that person that people feel comfortable going to, and everything else will be okay. That's really, I mean, like I said, that didn't happen. It didn't happen for me. But again, with like different generation, and so for these, I'm so proud of these young people. It's like they are just amazing. They whip out their phones, and they wouldn't put up with what I put up with. So yeah, there's hope out there, but just they need to be true to themselves. Isn't that really what we all need to be at the end of the day? Is just that person, that we want to, the way we want people to treat us, we treat them. It's the same concept. Yeah.
It is. It is. And you're right. I mean, with the new generation, if you try to screen to them, they will put the video on TikTok or whatever, the channel they prefer, and that you will be exposed, and it's going to be harder. And actually, also because going back to one of the things you can do to react to an abuser is how, in a previous interview I discussed with Kimberly Williams, and she said you need to record everything. You need to take note of what's happening to you, dates, times, events, and everything else. That's something, those records you can use then against them. It's a proof. It can be a proof of abusive behavior. There are a lot of things I'm taking away from this conversation, Vicki. It's the first thing is the courage and the initiative and the resilience. Or probably more than the resilience is anti-fragility that you showed to, first of all, to yourself, to your husband, and to all the people that you are helping, and how far you want to go. And that's it's a lot, and that's one the thing that is important. And of course, other things I'm taking away is the possibility of recovery. And it's not just people like you, but everyone can recover, can heal from abusive behaviors. And there are so many tools out there. It's just a matter of finding the best tool for you. You might not have the husband that you have, but there is surely someone else, even pro bono professionals. They will help. They're ready to help. I really commend what you're doing, and then with the legislation. I hope everything will go well, and your state, Massachusetts, and Long Island, there will be those. They will be like those who make the way for more to come, even to a federal level, and I hope other countries as well will learn from this. So thank you very much for what you're doing. Thank you very much for having been a great guest on this.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and, for helping us get the word out, and, just your support. I know if you're going to, you're going to have Jen on, and you had Kimberly on. These are all people who are in our network and everything too. So we really deeply appreciate what you're doing. This is it's key, raising public awareness and, getting to people who do not realize that this is happening out there. So what you're doing is just as important, and we thank you.